นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. Yesterday we celebrated the New Year, which the Lunar New Year, or we say Southeast Asian New Year, celebrated in those countries like Thailand, Burma, Sri Lanka, Cambodia. Coincides with the changing of the seasons in Asia from hot season to rainy season. But the purpose of the celebration is what we call the water pouring ceremony, where pour water over the hands of teachers as an expression of gratitude, respect for having received teachings, guidance over the years. And Buddhists will also make these small gestures towards parents, grandparents as well, who are first teachers. And people will maybe visit home, show their respect in different ways. Offering flowers, bathing the hands, and so on. And this is because it's a recognition, isn't it, of the huge importance that parents and teachers play in our life in passing on the Dhamma to us. And we have Dhamma friends as well, Kalyana Mitta, but we spend a large part of our life, the first part of our life, with parents, under their care and guidance. And also we have a huge debt to our teachers. Number one, the Buddha, but also living teachers in this era, so from Ajahn down to our current teachers such as Lumpur Liam, Lumpur Anand, and so on. Because they give us the Dhamma. Parents and teachers give us or pass on the Dhamma, which means not just the truth, but also includes the path of practice, the way that leads to us understanding or seeing the truth. Somebody once asked Lumpur Cha to summarize the Buddhist path of practice. And I think that question he's answered in a number of different ways over the years. But one answer he gave was the Buddhist path teaches us what is wrong and how to abandon that, teaches us what is right and how to cultivate that, and then teaches us how to let go of it all, not to cling to anything. So when we come into the world and we're young, we don't know much, and we depend on our parents for that. In the beginning, they teach us the wrong things to do, what we should do, how we should avoid doing the wrong thing, how we should give up wrong ways of behavior. and what they are, and they teach us what are the right things and how to cultivate them. So we can separate the wrong from the right from the wrong, the good from the bad from the good. That maybe is enhanced over the years as we go out and maybe meet Dhamma teachers. Then they will refine that knowledge and give us the means to develop deeper understanding of what is right, wrong, good, bad. This is based on the teaching, the law of karma, that our actions have consequences, our intentional actions. Karma is intention. And it's for our own interest to know that, because it's very easy to live in the world and make bad karma, which comes back to us in the form of what we call vibhaka karma, resultant karma. Bad karma originates from bad intention, intentional action rooted in some form of greed, anger, delusion. It leads on to speech, action, and that leads on to vibhaka karma, resultant karma. And it's a cycle often that reinforces itself. So we maybe unwittingly or sometimes knowingly, make some bad karma, hurt ourselves, hurt others, do things that have negative consequences for ourselves and others. Then we receive the results, and receiving the results is a primary cause for us to do more bad karma, because we don't like receiving the results of our previous bad karma. So when things go wrong as a result of past bad karma, we often make it worse. We often act in destructive, negative ways when we meet with problems in life. We compound them, we think negatively about our problems and difficulties that we encounter, and then we go and do and say things that only make it worse. And then we have to receive further fruits of karma. So the Buddha said this is a very clear cycle that he identified for humans in their life. We get caught into these cycles, which is almost like a downward spiral. You make some negative karma, you receive the fruits, and then you make more, because you put under pressure by the first bit of negative karma, and it just gets worse and worse. But then of course, say, when we're kids, our parents love us and they want us to be happy, successful, so they teach us what is good karma, what is right, as opposed to what is wrong. So encourage us to do the right thing. So they teach us all kinds of good things, like not to kill, steal, lie, to be honest, to be kind, not to be lazy, not to be selfish, and so on, in the hope that we'll be creating good karma, bringing good results back to us. And that also is a cycle. So good intention leads to good karma, leads to good vibhaka karma, good results, which come back to us. And they tend to sustain us and support us in making further good karma. If we are aware enough, we might realize we're receiving the fruits of our past good karma and want to maintain them and build on them, repeat them, do more of them. Even if we're not fully aware that we're receiving the fruits of our past good karma, just by nature, the consequences of your skillful good actions are conducive to happiness. So they will quite naturally be inclining our mind towards making more good karma, we say good supportive conditions. So our parents and teachers and Dhamma friends who point this out to us and remind us of these simple truths are doing us a big favour, helping us. They're saving us a lot of trouble, because if you listen and value to your parents' advice, teachers' advice, Dhamma friends' advice, well, they're keeping you out of trouble when they're saying, well, don't do that because it will bring you suffering. Do this because it will make you happy. The idea being that over time, that Dhamma becomes established in your heart. So you're no longer just relying on the words and teachings of others, but you actually know for yourself. Through your own experience, you know what is right and wrong, good and bad. And then you act accordingly without having to ask anyone, you just know. And of course, acting in skillful ways, we say making good karma, brings its good result, brings us happiness. Say for example, say in a family, you have a relationship, two people are partners, you have parents and children. We say if they have the Dhamma in their hearts, meaning they understand what is good karma and bad karma and act accordingly, that family will be peaceful, happy. Whether they're rich, poor, successful in a worldly sense, that's a slightly different issue. They may be related, but more importantly is whether they have Dhamma or not. And you can be very poor but still have Dhamma. So you see that in northeast Thailand, where I used to live and practice. The people are very poor. When I first went there, a lot of them hardly even used money or cash. There was still a lot of bartering going on, just exchanging goods and services without even having to use cash. It's probably gone now, everything is money economy, that's the way the world is going, but there was still a lot of bartering and just very simple living, growing food, collecting, gathering, hunting food. Often people lived in very simple houses without electricity, without much furnishing, maybe without any vehicles and so on. They lived very simply, but some of them had the Dhamma. If you have the Dhamma, then your heart is at peace because you understand what is good and bad karma. And you meet people like that who had learned what is right and wrong, and they had those qualities that we call hiriotapa, sense of shame, fear of wrongdoing, because they know karma is true, and then if you make bad karma, you're going to have to deal with the consequences. So they had enough awareness to avoid doing that wherever they could. So you can be quite poor and live with the Dhamma and have harmonious relations with your partner, your children. You can have harmonious relations with your fellow workers, perhaps, because of Dhamma. And then people who don't have Dhamma often are lost. They might not know they're lost, but they tend to be lost. So they don't quite know what is good, bad, or don't understand fully, and therefore don't practice accordingly. So they can make suffering for themselves and others quite quickly, quite easily. So in northeast Thailand, for instance, you would see that as well. It was all like heaven on earth, and everybody was living according to the Dhamma. There would be many people living according to the Dhamma and benefiting from the Dhamma. Others would not. They reject the Dhamma, have wrong views or different views, and they had a whole different value system. So like in any other part of the world, people who are dishonest or violent, aggressive, addicted to gambling, drinking, and so on. And that can be in a poor society, a place where there's a lot of economic hardship, like northeast Thailand, or in cities where you have a whole range, don't you? You have a range of people who are, some neighborhoods are more wealthy, some are poor, some people have huge income, influence, power, and some people are very poor and have no income, unemployed. You get the whole range as well. But the way the Buddha talked about society is karma is what divides people up. And you can divide people in economic terms as well, and that's what governments and research and education tends to do these days. Divide you according to your income, your social group and so on. But the Buddha divided people according to karma. Actually, the Buddha wasn't even doing that. He's just noting how nature divides people by karma. So, rich people can make good and bad karma. Poor people can make good and bad karma. Middle-income people can make good and bad karma. Totally penniless monks and nuns can make good and bad karma. It's not necessarily related to your income. But it does divide us as people. So those who give you this kind of knowledge and insight, especially when you're young, it can really save you a lot of suffering in life. If you have parents who remind you what is good karma and encourage you not to make bad karma, they can really save you a lot of time and suffering. Same with teachers, Dhamma teachers. That's why we have these occasions where we acknowledge or show our appreciation for parents and teachers, because they may have saved our bacon on many occasions through their wise words. Or if we've run into trouble, they may give us the way out once we may already be suffering, but they still give us the way out, give us support, help us out of suffering, even if we've got into it. In the development of our mind, our hearts and minds in the Buddhist path, this is an essential way we grow as human beings. Understanding what is good and bad karma, acting accordingly, and refining this awareness, because that leads on to developing the strengths of minds that, as Ajahn Chah said, that will lead us to ultimately be able to let go of both the good and bad. But that's a very high Dhamma. It's really the Dhamma of what we call Magga, Phala, Nibbana. Magga, Phala, Nibbana, the Buddhist path to enlightenment, and the fruit path, the fruit and enlightenment. This comes out of the understanding of karma and the fruits of karma. And the only way to really refine our awareness to get to the point where you can completely go beyond karma is through training the mind in sila, samadhi and panya, the Eightfold Path. And we can't avoid sila, and that lies within making good karma, avoiding making bad karma. Sila goes hand in hand with that. But you can't develop strong, steady states of mind, the peace, the calm of samadhi, without sila. The nature of sila is it brings stability, clarity, stability, steadiness of mind, freedom from remorse, freedom from anxiety. Even just the 5 precepts do that when we consciously cultivate them in daily life. But when we don't keep sila, we don't live in an ethical way, then we constantly say and do things that come back to us and cause us mental agitation, regret, anxiety, guilt. And that makes it very hard for the mind to settle down and develop samadhi. So all these Dhamma teachers emphasize the importance of ethical living, moral action, because it supports the training of the mind in samadhi. The actual development of samadhi, we need to use meditation techniques such as mindfulness of breathing, or recollection of the Buddha, cultivation of the 4 Brahmaviharas and so on. And there's different techniques we use. But the aim is always to bring up this quality of mindful awareness in the present moment so we can pay attention and learn more directly from experience the nature of body and mind. Or we say nama rupa, mind and body, or mentality, physicality, mental phenomena, physical phenomena. In order to learn from your experience, your mind has to be steady, calm, and pay attention. And there has to be a certain turning of the mind to investigate, we say, investigate the truth of these things. So although we hear the Dhamma from these Dhamma teachers and maybe even our parents, we hear terms of Dhamma, some concepts and teachings, it's still not enough to liberate us from the whole round of karma and vibhaka, or making karma, receiving the fruits of our karma. We have to develop direct knowledge, what we call bhavana maya panya. Direct knowledge of the way things are, which even goes out beyond the books. Starts with the books maybe, as giving us a basis for understanding, but comes through developing direct knowledge from mindfulness and awareness of the way things are. And that takes practice, training. We need to keep cultivating this quality of mindful awareness so that we experience the stillness, the clarity of mind to see things as they are. You know, we all know what it's like when we're not very mindful, not very aware. We tend to be lost in the mind of mental proliferation, storytelling, emotions, embellishing and adding on to experience by always thinking about it. Nowadays we use the term overthinking. We're always overthinking things. So the mind moves away from direct experience of reality into the world of storytelling and creation. One of the phrases Ajahn Chah used is Jit Prung Dang. Prung Dang, Prung means to we say add in, to concoct, to create, to add in. Dang means to sort of arrange together, put together. So it's like adding in ingredients and then putting them together. So that you can use this word with cooking. You have the recipe, the ingredients, and then you put them together, add them together, and you create something. If you're a cook, or you like cooking, then that's your happiness, is being able to create something that's tasty, maybe something original, unique, whatever. But it's what we're doing with our mind all the time, whether we realize it or not. And it comes from the mind that is following karma, trails of karma, creating with intentional action and intentional thought. And this is why we learn first of all what is the difference between good and bad karma, because it's better to create good karma than bad karma. And even the practice of mindfulness and developing awareness and states of calm, samadhi, is a form of karma, but it's good karma. You might call it a subtle concoction or fabrication of the mind, subtle creations of the mind, but they're useful for us in developing the mind. But if we don't develop mindfulness, well, this creating, concocting, adding on to experiences constantly taking place. It's what leads to the overthinking, the anxiety, the stress, the confusions, and the lack of peace that often brings us to want to meditate in the first place. So all of our teachers encourage us to be more mindful, pay attention, to bring the mind more under control, and so that we can know exactly what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're doing, and begin to unravel where suffering does come from, to see where we attach to things. It's another way Ajahn Chah taught about the practice. What you attach to will be the basis for your suffering. Because where you cling and attach, you're constantly forming expectations and constantly being disappointed. So you cling to the body with this sense of self, this is my body, and you constantly expect the body to be a certain way, healthy, bring you pleasure, be the way you want, look the way you want. But because we cling, it very quickly leads us to disappointment, and the more we cling, the more disappointment we experience, because we can't ultimately control the body. It goes according to nature, it's constantly changing, aging. It's another part of our karma, how our body is, how healthy we are, how weak and ill we get, how we look. If you're not happy with the way you look when you look in the mirror, you blame yourself, because it's a result of your past karma, maybe from past life, or maybe this life. What we eat, how we use this body, how we treat this body, that's karma, isn't it? It's coming back to us. Some things are directly attributed to our actions, some things are more indirectly dependent on our actions, and you can't always see cause and effect. Say, like when you get ill, sometimes the illness just comes out of the blue. You can't just pin it down and say, oh, this is my old karma getting ill. Maybe it is, maybe it's just changes in the weather, or picking up some germs from your neighbor or something. But we cling to the body, and then the mind creates its reactions and stories about the body. And that's the same with the mind, the feelings, pleasure and pain. And we have pleasure and pain with the body, but we have pleasure and pain with the mind as well. Emotional pain comes with disappointments, unhappiness, misunderstandings of the truth. We have perceptions and thoughts, again back to the thought creating process. When we're not paying attention to these things, we tend to cling to them and suffer with them. Suffer with every thought. If it's a useful train of thought, we can still suffer because we try and hang on to it, and it fades away. Or a thought process combined with pleasant feeling, what we might call a good mood. We cling on to it, we identify with it, we hold on to it, but then it changes on us, maybe followed by a more ordinary mood, or even a mood with displeasure, emotional pain. So this body and mind are the basis for clinging. It's what we cling to, and this is what feeds endless storytelling, reactions, thoughts, what we think and feel about ourselves, body and mind, and then of course the world around us. When we're not very mindful, we don't pay attention to what's going on. Well, that process just keeps going on, reinforcing itself. It's quite tiring and can create all kinds of stress and anxiety, agitation, what you might summarize as suffering. When we cultivate mindfulness, the path, when we're going in the opposite direction, we're establishing mindfulness, that gives us the ability to pay attention and learn and know what's going on. Maybe to step back or release the mind a bit from this process of constantly creating sense of self in every thought, feeling, in the body. And the mind experiences more what we call detached awareness or equanimity. And the Buddha said this is the way out of suffering, the way beyond the process of constantly concocting and adding on and creating suffering, just knowing experience but not adding on, not always reacting, not overthinking, just knowing experience. Like when you're meditating and your mindfulness improves, you start to feel more calm, your mind experiences more stillness, and it feels peaceful. Why is that? Because you're slowing down the process of creating and storytelling. And you can know your experience more directly, without adding on, without overthinking. It doesn't mean to say you can't use your mind to be creative or do things in this world, but to do with mindfulness. If you have to be inventive or create things, we'll create with mindfulness. So you're still looking after the mind, paying attention. If the goal of the path of practice is a mind of non-clinging, then this development of mindful awareness and teaching ourselves not to cling onto everything must be the path that leads to that. This is what we're learning as we meditate and develop more mindfulness, and not just when we meditate, but throughout our daily life. Wherever you're suffering, there must be some clinging there, something you're holding on to. A way of viewing things, a thought pattern, a thought process, a feeling, something happening to your body, some idea about your life, the world. This is all what we summarize, we say, as a sense of self, the conceit of self. As you develop mindfulness and pay attention, maybe look and ask yourself, well, where is this sense of self? Where is it sitting? Where is it? Is it in the body? If the body is changing all the time, that's not much of a self. You could say it's a self that's always changing. That might be right. There's nothing solid, lasting, unchanging in a body, because the body is aging every day, going towards the end of its life one day. If it's the mind, well, it's the same problem. You could say the mind is the self. Well, it's a self that's constantly changing. Thoughts arising, passing away, feelings, sensations passing away. It's not that there's nothing there, but there's nothing that you can pin down and say, this is me, the self that is sort of solid, unchanging, knowing everything. When we investigate this, say when you're meditating, just investigate that voice that's always judging, criticizing, forming views and opinions about yourself, the world, other people. Where is that coming from? Who is it? Who is asking those questions, making those judgments, forming those opinions? And the Buddha's answer is, well, there's nothing there that you can point out as a solid, lasting self. The self is, the act of clinging is what is the self. We cling to those opinions and views, and that's coming from delusions, and that's why it leads on to suffering. If you establish mindfulness, investigate this, and maybe you might, it's like dispersing the murkiness of the mind. The mind becomes clearer, brighter. You say, oh, maybe there isn't any self there anyway. There's a more pure quality of knowing, just knowing, but without overthinking, adding on, proliferating. It's just knowing things. And you don't need to call that a self. The very need to say something is self or identify with a self, even that need disappears. That's Dhamma, isn't it? Dhamma is when the mind is knowing the truth, knowing the way things are, but without creating anything out of it, or without adding on, without overthinking, but just knowing. So maybe I'll leave you with those reflections tonight.